there was little bit doubt in my mind. That's why I sent the message to you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I know it is still pending. There are a
Uh,
few things which are still to be responded to.
yeah,
So
that's
it
why
is
I
not
didn't.
that.
Sir, that's why I didn't send the reminder. I was thinking like sir was thinking like there's some little bit syllabus is little bit pending. That's why.
No, 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 not that. There are so many things that are happening. So I am tied up with so many
Oh, sir, oh, sir.
works. So life is getting too busy.
Yeah, so.
I know. I'll respond to you. I'll respond.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I think we should start now. We'll start as others keep joining. No problem. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Very good. Good. All right. So, the basic question, the first couple of sessions, some of you had a doubt, as to why we are doing so many things and we are not really getting into the core of the development center. So from session 6 onwards, 6 and 7, basically, these are the core activities of the development center. And today we will know how actually a development center can be organized. If any one of you want to get into the business of setting up an assessment center or a development center, I think you will get a perspective as to what are the administrative requirements for commencing a development center. This is what you will get. And so initially we started off understanding what are the competencies and all. Then we talked about the frameworks for technical competency and then the leadership competencies. Then we understood what a development center means. And I've also added, though it is not a part of the syllabus for you, but for technically, to be conceptually clear, I've also added the assessment center and how it differs from a development center. And then today we will discuss about what goes into the organization of a development center. How do actually things happen in a development center? What are the different people involved? What roles they play? What documents are prepared? What are the contents of those things? Such issues we will discuss today. So, if you have any questions related to the syllabus covered so far, you can ask me so that I can either integrate them in the deliberations for today, or I will clarify them if required in the beginning itself. Any questions related to the sessions held so far? I see today's, and I think somebody, Zahara is new for the first time. Are you attending the class for the first time?
No, sir, I've attended it before. However, this is actually not my elective. So I'm just here to listen.
This is not your elective.
No.
Oh, that's quite interesting. You are investing in your time in something which is not really your elective. So, welcome.
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, Mr. Jugal Kishore has joined. All right, so let's move on. So this and all I'll skip. Okay, first of all, what do you understand by now? What is a development center? Any one of you can respond. What do you understand by development center? Yes, Mr. Sandeep.
Yeah, I think so. Development center is provide to platform to develop employees and leadership and there's a lots of things to measure leadership and skill assessment, sir.
Okay, okay. Yeah, Jeevan Jyoti ma'am.
Um, it is majorly used for the development of the inner employees, and it has been used like with multiple tools, multiple techniques, multiple observers. um, they come to a certain feedback, and the feedback is being shared with the employees so for their development. That is the slight difference between the assessment center and development center. In development center, they clearly give the share the feedbacks and for the development of the participants.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, basically, in a nutshell, if you have to answer this in one sentence, a development center basically assesses the skill gaps of employees with reference to the competencies required for their job role. Right? Their development center is not going to undertake the responsibility for developing the employees. It only assesses. So, what is that? You have the input of the what goes as an input to the development center. The input is the competencies required for a job role. And what does the development center do? It takes the employees who are to be assessed and they make an assessment. And what do they give out? They give out a report on what are the good things about the employee, the positive points about the employee, and then they also tell what are the areas of development, which are basically these gaps in his, you know, obviously when you're sending somebody for the development center, you have an obvious reason why a person is referred there, either for promotion or for better performance in the current job. So for the purpose for which an employee is referred to the development center, with reference to that, the center makes an assessment with appropriate tools and techniques, and the assessment is done by multiple assessors and multiple candidates will be assessed together, and multiple competencies are assessed, and every competency will be assessed at least using 2 3 different tools, and that gives finally it all culminates into an understanding of the person and his capabilities gap or his competencies gap. So what are the gaps in his competencies and what are his strengths? You make a report on that, and that report is sent to the organization which is referring the employee to the development center. Now, thereafter, the responsibility of developing the employee rests with the organization concerned, and that before they undertake it, they ask the employee to prepare a IDA, individual development, IDP, individual development plan. That will be refined with the consultation of the boss concerned, and then they will put it to execution. So, in a sense, if you have to answer this development center, it suffices to say it makes an assessment of the individual and gives it a report on the gap in the competencies so that the development of the employees can be undertaken by the organization concerned further in a collaboration with the or with the jointly with the individual concerned. Right? That is what it is. Am I clear now? Have I made the point clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So obviously the development center, yeah, Mr. Jugal Kishore.
Dr. Rao, just wanted to understand one more thing from your side because see, right now we are talking about the gap analysis or the identification of the training needs or the
Yes,
competency which is required for a specific job profile or a job role.
yes,
Uh, but when we actually perform, let's say, gap analysis or training needs analysis as an individual activity, there also, like, we generally try to identify the same kind of a thing for an individual. But here, if we, I think if I have understood correctly, the difference of development center versus the different tools, whatever we apply, like TNI or a TNA or a gap analysis, is that like it actually help us the prepare the complete competency framework for that, not only for that individual but for that specific department or a domain, and how we can align it to the organization's goal. Is it the right understanding?
Okay, the focus of development center is the individual concern. Although we don't take only one individual and put him or her through all the development center processes, but the focus of understanding is the competency gap in the individual, right? And the TNA or TNI that we are talking about actually doesn't, when we speak about TNA or TNI, we don't really talk about the competencies. They are all related to various other dimensions using different tools. The tools used for TNA are different from the tools used for the development center. These are under the observation of multiple assessors in the development center, whereas in TNA you really do not do with multiple observations or multiple assessors. Either you do it through a questionnaire or an interview or observation or work sampling and things like that, but the process followed there is entirely different from what is done here. And in terms of the biases, I think the TNA and TNI do not neutralize the biases, whereas the development center does it because it's a third party, it's an independent entity where you expect the assessment to be done much more objectively and scientifically. That does not mean, I do not really mean by that that the TNA or TNI is not done scientifically. Usually, TNA or TNI is done by somebody within the company, and the purpose is for the purpose there is very different from the DC. And in DC, at the end of it, after you share the report with the individual, you expect the individual to prepare a IDP. Whereas in a TNI or a TNA, it is the organization's L&D department to tailor make or curate the content for a certain program where the participants can be predefined by the outcomes of the TNA or the TNI. Right. So they both are different. I would rather put it in this way. TNA, TNI are a little more traditional way of approaching the L&D requirements. And that does not mean that they are not relevant. They are relevant in certain contexts. But when you want to have a focused approach, the job person fit, and you want to develop the careers of people and you want to create a career path for the people, then the development center is much more focused to meet the requirements of the individual. I hope I have made the point clear.
Yeah. So I think with the help of this explanation, that I think last time also we discussed that it is a kind of a third party, like which is helping
Yes,
the org to
yes, yes.
understand that what kind of a competency will be required to perform a specific job role or maybe a profile.
Yes, it is a specialist job. You're going to a specialized organization with some specialists in that. All that you do is you pay them the consultancy charges for the DC, and the you give them the inputs in terms of what kind of a job role you want them to assess and what competencies are required for that. And the rest of it is left to the experts there to come out with a very, very clear and focused assessment and give out a report in terms of what needs to be done with those individuals to make them ready for the role for which you want them to prepare.
Thank you, Dr. Rav. Thanks for the
Right,
clarity.
right. Thank you. All right. So I think with that understanding, let us move on. What actually, how do you organize your development center? So development center is, I think one of the problems I feel in the entire L&D space. Not only in L&D, I think HR itself, there is a problem. Unlike marketing and finance, HR is a little dicey thing. There are a lot of gray areas. When you say development center, it gives, there is a misconception about the concept itself. I think some better term should be probably used for that purpose. We leave it to the experts in the field. So it is basically a technique. It is not a center per se. Although it is called center, basically you are making an assessment using techniques with the support of some people, experts there. And the purpose of that is aimed at improving the individual's performance. And how do you individual's performance increased? It is increased by way of identifying the gaps in his performance or competencies, and then making good those competencies through various interventions. Some of them may be individual uh, initiatives, some may be organizational designed initiatives, but finally you want to make the individual fit for the job role that you are trying to place him eventually. So for that, since we have also said that there is to be done objectively, you are going to use multiple observations or by multiple assessors. Thereby, to some extent, the neutrality is achieved. And then you're going to assess each competence using by at least 2 to 3 different tools. Therefore, you cannot fake your behavior in one instance. So you're faking of a behavior, if it is there, that will be detected in some form or the other. And finally, the assessors will sit and discuss about an individual, come out with a common report. Therefore, a lot of deliberations will happen in terms of giving out a very good, open, and objective report. And since the DC is generally a third party, there is no reason for them to be biased towards a particular person, either in a positive sense or in a negative sense. So it is related to the work competencies, and the behaviors are an integral component of it, and they have to be also recorded. Now, the techniques consist of a group of people participating in various exercises and simulations. That is what is important. And therefore, a development center requires a lot of experts who can curate a set of tools and techniques for making an assessment for a particular job role. So, what is DC in essence? It is a well designed, blended set of tests, exercises, and simulations and activities that cover all aspects of a group of competencies. Obviously, you will not send a person to be assessed only for one competence, to provide a valid understanding of the individual's competencies. Now, once you have that, which is more, I would say, a contemporary way of assessing an individual's performance, then you can do whatever is required from the organization side to improve his or her performance. Therefore, it is first, let us understand what a DC is not. A DC is not a set of instruments. Just because you have some set of instruments in your department or organization, that does not mean that you've got a DC, a full-fledged DC. DC is much more than that. It is not a set of interviews. It is not a battery of psychometric tests. It is not a set of work sample tests. It is not gathering views by only one assessor. It is not observing multiple participants on one competency. And it is not a building or an institution. We just have hire a building or take a building and say a development center, you put the board, doesn't become one. I think it requires a lot more work, and you'll have to do it very, very scientifically. So, who are all the people who will be required in the DC? I mean, when I'm giving you this information, please make note that setting up a DC requires different rules. But if you're setting up something new, you may not have all these rules. Some of the rules may be combined. So it is important to understand these rules are necessary, but that many people may not be necessary in the beginning if somebody is planning to set up a development center. I think in India there's a lot of scope for setting up development center and assessment centers. We still follow very old, not so scientific ways of either recruitment or career development process in the organizations. So please understand these roles. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Now, first, you need a DC designer. Now, what does he or she do? The designer is responsible for designing and creating tools and exercises that help assess the specified competencies. So, this person should be an expert in understanding the competencies, and he should be able to map the competencies to a job role. Now, who provides the information on job role and the competencies? obviously the organization who is referring the employee to the development center has to provide. That is the input to the development center. Now, along with the competencies, it is also desirable the organization gives him or her the the job analysis. Basically, what is the traditional way of doing the job analysis? Job analysis is now I'm using the word traditional, although job analysis is fundamental for any job role in any organization. I think it is fast becoming a sort of a, a traditional assessment vis-a-vis what we are now today looking at as the competency related job role. Because many IT companies in IT now they are moving away from job specifications and they are going for competency assessment, irrespective of your uh, education qualifications and experience. You have certain competencies. People are wanting to and willing to hire employees because they want performance, not just the qualifications. Now, the job designer should understand the objective of development center, the target participants, who are the people who are going to come in for assessment, and intended usage of the report. Now, quite often the reports are, unfortunately, again, it is to say that any assessments done in India for any purpose. Ultimately, they are used by the organization's leadership teams for some political purposes, but then that is not going to help. You have to be absolutely professional in using these documents, and therefore the development center designer should make them aware that they are to be used only for the intended purposes and not for any other purpose. And the number of days the DC has to be conducted, because the employees have to be moved out of their organization to a development center. Obviously, we'll have to tell the organization this is the time engagement for them, and the employees have to be available. They cannot be pulled out in the middle. Understand the industry's context, participant profiles, and business scenario. So you also have to have a macro understanding of what's happening as a designer, and that also includes, what are the kinds of trends in competency requirements of organizations. I'll just tell you an example, since again I'm coming from the training and the teaching field. Now, today the competencies required for a teacher, both at the school level, at the higher education level, whether you take any K-12 or university role, are far different from what they were, I would say, 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Today, everybody is expected to understand AI. Everybody is expected to understand research, irrespective of your background. Even in school, under the National Educational Policy 2020, children are given research-based projects, which the school expects them to, the child to use internet-based, information sources, and then put together a report on. That is, research is done using secondary sources, but this child is expected to produce a report. Now, this competence was not required by the teachers for almost 70 years or 75 years since independence. But now, even a teacher is expected to learn. So, the competencies of teachers today are required are different from what they were in the past. And same way in the corporates. I think every one of us should now know in the corporates also how AI can enhance our performance in the organization. Therefore, the one of the competencies how AI can be leveraged for performance improvement. So the designer should get an overall perspective and also the trends that are happening in the competency requirements of organizations, depending on the industry in which the referred employees are working. Then you require somebody to administer the development center. What does he do? He decides the DC needs to be facilitated across multiple days. Now you require most important thing is the tools should be functional, they should be available. The functionality should not be affected by some technical snags or some internet issues and things like that. So there must be an administrator who takes care of a smooth functioning of the entire process once it is initiated. Both the assessors as well as the participants should seamlessly go through the process, understands and designs the processes administratively, anticipates challenges in advance, and engages participants in the DC processes. Now, therefore, the job of an administrator is more of a facilitation work. He has to understand and which also means there must be some interaction between the designer and the assessors. They must communicate to each other what are the administrative requirements at the center and make sure that everything goes on smoothly. Then the key participants in this entire process are the assessors, because they are the people who will finally roll out a report against each person, and therefore that report is very, very important, and they must have the understanding of that. Understand the competencies well. First of all, they must know what are the competencies that they're going to assess, and they must be competent. They must be competent to make the assessment along with the behavioral indicators of the participants, which means they must be extremely good observers, and an observation requires a lot of concentration. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the administrator to make sure that the assessors will have full, attention to the process that is happening. They should not be disturbed with any lack of administrative facilities. Have complete knowledge of the activities and exercises used in the development processes, and then alert. They must have documents to make notes of. The observations have to be noted simultaneously when the process happens. It is not a good practice for the assessor to think that I'll make the observations on each participant at the end of the process. That may not be it may not be possible for each one of us to remember. I think it is ideal for them to make observations simultaneously when the process is on, and then they can always collate together the way we want to frame it. Remain unbiased in their observations. They should not have any, as far as possible, they should avoid, the biases. We are all human beings, so sometimes we may have some biases which we cannot probably, as a human, you may not avoid some, but they must be conscious that they should avoid the biases. Give Gives immediate, reflective, and relevant and competency-based feedback, which I said earlier, that they must make a note of all their observations concurrently, so that you don't miss out on any important point that you want to make. And then they must have the ability to summarize and collate all that together and frame a good report. So these are all very important from the perspective of the valid, useful, meaningful report to be given on a candidate. Then you will have a DC facilitator who ensures that all participants understand the methodology, expectations, and time limitations in which they need to perform the designed activities. So somebody who has to brief the participant, it's not going to be one participant, it will be multiple participants, and they all must have similar understanding. So there is somebody who talks about it, who understands it, who communicates it, who clarifies the doubts related to a process. That person's job is to make sure that you are creating a level playing field for everybody to participate at the same level, so that the reports can also be you are creating a comparability among the reports. If somebody has to be promoted among a set of people, then the comparability is also important. And to that extent, it is important that everybody understands the processes equally well. So if the facilitator is able to involve participants in sharing their reflections in the DC processes, now it is also important that the participants will also come back and tell us what happened in the process when they follow, and they share their own feedback. So that is useful for any further improvement in the process of the DC. Therefore, the facilitator should also create a congenial atmosphere where the participants can openly and fearlessly share their feedback. And that is one of the reasons why it has to be a third party outside, whereas if it is done internally, people may have hesitation about sharing their feedback on the DC processes. There always internally there can be some, issues related to feedback, and therefore people do not express themselves freely. Now, the facilitator allows the assessor to share their observations about the participant performance and their competencies. So it is the facilitation meeting is to be done by towards the end of the process. And at that point in time, I think the facilitator should also make sure that the free flow of open information based on observations and the facts, which actually took place in the development center, should only guide the feedback, not any prior knowledge or any opinions. Opinions of the facilitators or the assessors are not important. I think it should be based on their observations and opinions. Now you require a DC coordinator because the DC has to coordinate, deal with some external and internal stakeholders. So their job is to make sure that everything goes on smoothly and efficiently. Timelines are met, and if the DC is maintained without any compromise on anything. They must coordinate with the people who are being shortlisted for the DC. They must make sure that everybody comes on time and they participate. All those things have to be taken care by somebody at the coordination level. Now, the most important one, apart from the SSR, the other one is the most important is the participant. Now, the participants, when they come, actually, when you refer somebody to a development center, you will have lots of questions reeling in your mind. So they come with a lot of assumptions, fears, and sometimes some feedback from people who have gone through this process earlier. So you must first make sure that the participants feel comfortable in going through the process and without any stress. So must have an open mind and participate completely in the process. So this happens, the facilitator there in the development center, I think, must give some initial orientation that it is not DC is not a targeted operation for any punishment kind of a thing. DC is the primary purpose of DC is development of the people who are coming there. So if that positive message reaches the participant also owns up the processes that he is going through. Then if he is able to get the real reflection of his own competencies, the organization and himself can work on the gaps, and that will pave the way for better career positioning for the individual concerned. Now, he or she does not challenge or question the process once it begins, because the DC is an expert process. Somebody with some half-baked information or some knowledge based on some Google, based knowledge, they should not disrupt the process. Once you start the process, I think they should continue the process with full faith and trust in the development center organizers and fully cooperate so that his own report will be valuable at the end. Engages completely with the processes, must be their natural self and bring authenticity. This is what I said. There should not be any faking of anybody. People should not fake themselves. They must be true to themselves. They must be very honest and authentic in their behavior so that they are able to get a true reflection of what their self is, and then they can work on their further development. But if you know the job role for which you are going to be considered and you know some competencies related to that, you try to behave artificially, that does not serve the true purpose of being referred to a development center. Understand that the process will help them to grow and demonstrate professional maturity. I think that is the very, very important, the DC participant. Now, any questions in the the DC roles? Any questions? Does it, yeah, yes, Preeti ma'am.
Yeah, Dr. Rao, can you come to slide 7, the earlier one?
7, okay.
Yeah, these three roles like is a designer, administrator, and assessor needs to be the same person, or can they be different? And if they are different, how the competencies differ?
Okay, now see, as I said earlier, if the competency development center is a large one, uh, mm, probably one person cannot do all those roles. Definitely, the designer requirements are different from the administrator competencies and the assessor competencies. In any case, assessors cannot be administrators and designers. Assessors have to be completely independent, and they should only focus on assessors. But if you are setting up a new development center and you are new to this entire, competency assessment, then maybe the administrator and designer roles can probably be handled by somebody, because you do not want to increase your overheads in the beginning, and the scale of operations may not allow you to really go for multiple employees. So therefore I would imagine that the designer and administrator roles can probably be handled by somebody at the beginning, but definitely assessor and administrator, assessor and designer may not be the same, and they have to be different, because your focus as assessor is completely the candidate and nothing else. I hope I have answered you.
Yeah. Thank you.
right? Okay. All right. Now, it's all fine that we've got the paraphernalia and the number of people, you've got some inputs for the assessment and all. But then how do you document? What way you document? Because these documents are very, very important. Please remember, whatever you do, they are impacting an individual's career. And therefore, whatever is done in the DC has to be done with a lot of responsibility and accountability. And therefore, you should also know what kind of a documents are to be prepared and what you will ultimately share with your client who is referring them to your center. Uh, Preparatory documents clearly define competency framework along with behavioral and technical dimensions. So it has to be received from the organization that is referring you the candidates to your center. And if you have any doubts, you must get them clarified a priori. It cannot be in the middle of the process. Therefore, when the candidates come there, you must have a copy of the job analysis, job description, job specification. Though they're not used, still you must have a copy on your record. And then, as a designer, you can also make observations if something is missing in the competency requirements of the job. The competence is required, whether it's technical competency or leadership competency, whatever is required, you must document that. And then, if it is technical competencies, you must also be clear about deciphering whether those technical competencies relate to the job role. Quite often, we are not really we lack expertise in the organizations on documenting the competencies required for a particular role. Because in India, unfortunately, we do not have integrity for the job roles. Everybody is asked to do everything. That is how the approach is in the organizations. Even the best of the organizations, you don't have the integrity of job roles. We take this as very, very fluid. And therefore, at the designer stage, it is appropriate to be very clear about what are those requirements from the competency perspective. Then you must have the list of participants because you should know who are your the target audience. The job description we talked about, participant profiles, SSR's recording sheets. No, the recording sheets have to be prepared in advance and keep them ready so that you don't have to waste your time in documenting certain trivial details. Then final report format, in which way, start with the end is what we talk about in management. So what is the expectation of the organization in terms of the report? If you have that report in mind, then you can tailor make your all other processes to help you to prepare that report very effectively. And what is the role of the facilitators? These things have to be known to, and they're not only known, should be documented well. Then you must have a DC manual because everything is related to the human development, I would put it, uh, for the purpose of the organization. It's not really related to the personal, it is only related to the professional development. But a human being is involved. Therefore, the process and all have to be understood by various stakeholders in the development center in the same manner. Therefore, it is preferable to have a document which you call it as a DC manual, an instruction sheet for the facilitator for each activity. For each activity, before the activity starts, the facilitator will give what are the processes, what are the do's and don'ts and all that. A document which must be given to the participant when he or she first comes and registers there, what are the things that he should follow should be given to him. And preferably at some stage, I think you will have to also take an undertaking about what is the integrity to maintain the integrity of the process. That means he is going to give an undertaking, a document that includes competencies that can be observed at each point of time in the activity, along with any questions that the assessor must ask. To trigger the behavior, you may have to ask some questions so that your observations can be very, very clear on that. The ranking mechanism of how the participants are to be scored, the calibration mechanism, the report integration discussion points, and the DC schedule. All these documents are to be prepared so that the schedule for the DC should be available with the facilitator, with the assessors, and so that the necessary arrangements can be done, the administrator, so that the rooms and the activities can be prepared. If it is a role play, then what are the requirements of a role play? They have to be there before the candidates come there. if there's a simulation of a particular sort which requires the facility of computers, and that facility must be available at that particular time. So unless these things are all distributed, prepared, distributed in advance to various people, the process will not be smooth, and any disruption, any tension created during the process of assessment and development center might distract the candidates who are participants who are present there, and that might not give the appropriate report. A candidate should not say that I'm sorry, I was disturbed at this point because of this administrative reason, and therefore this is not the true reflection. That's a bad report on the DC. Therefore, one has to make sure that the documents are all prepared. Now, the assessors who are making the assessment, the best way is to facilitate the documents in such a way that they are able to focus more on the uh, observation of the candidates rather than documentation during the process. So the documents have to be properly well prepared so that the assessor's concentration is more on the participants and less on the documentary requirements to be recorded. And therefore you must first give them the competency framework, whatever the competency framework the organization has given you and accepted by the DC designer, that must be shared with them, and an instruction sheet for assessor and participant so that everybody is on the same page, recording sheets for various behaviors that you observe, report writing sheets, in which way the report you want them to present. If they have organized the information in their mind in that format, much easier for them to collate the report together. Scoring mechanism, integration sheet, schedule, and specific information on the company. Now, if some people are coming from a specific company, I think it is important for them to understand the details of the company. One of the things that we must remember in DC is if the participants are coming from different companies and going through the process together, then any situation that you are giving during the assessment should not be related to any one of those industries or companies in which they are working. Because if you give a situation in which they from the industry in which they are working, it might be unfair to those people who do not belong to that industry, and the people who are coming from the industry may have a better chance of performance. Therefore, the assessor should also know the profile of these companies from where the participants are coming, and they must prepare their assessment techniques in such a way that they are neutral to everybody and no participant has an undue advantage because of his familiarity with the industry or the company in the past. Right? Profiles of the participants and their roles at a later point just to avoid any biases. Right? So you try to avoid those things which will give any undue advantage to somebody and put somebody to an undue disadvantage so that everybody is on the same page. Then the report formats should be very simple, jargon free, accurate, and specifically related to the assessed competencies. So there's no blah 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 kind of a thing, no beating around the bush. Be to the point and express what is there, what have you seen authentically after a common agreement among the total number of assessors, 2 or 3 or 4, whoever it is. Unrelated competencies are not to be reported, even if you have some observations. So you must know what is the scope of the report and what is the work that you have done. And in addition to what you have done, if there are some observations, please get them out of the report. It is to be specific to the scope of the work for which a candidate has been referred to the development center. Yeah, any questions on that? All right. If you have no questions, let's move on. Then, how do you actually prepare what is the format, the structure of the development center report? Obviously, ultimately the crux of it has basically 3 parts. Yes, Mr. Jugal Kishore.
Dr. Rao, just wanted to understand, is there any tenure or maybe a timeline attached to the complete development center? So I'm sure, I think this is a kind of a complete activity which we are setting up with the help of a third party, correct?
Yeah.
So, who decides on the time frame or maybe the tenure? Like, okay, in this particular time frame, I want the entire things to be assessed, or the third party itself, like, is going to give us the timeline as an organization that okay, if I am assessing or preparing the competency framework for your, let's say, FLM or maybe a MLM or a SLM kind of roles, then it will take this much of a time, and then I would require your employees for this particular frequency to be a part of all these assessments and all these things. How?
Yeah, yeah, certainly yes, certainly yes. The time requirement for the development center depends on the roles for which a person is being assessed. Number one. Number two, the competencies required to be assessed. That is number two. And number three, the granularity to which extent the organization wants the assessments to be done. They are all the variables which will decide. Obviously, since the development center is an external entity that we're talking about, there will be some kind of a the organization will definitely ask them for a proposal for assessment, and then in that the DC will, the administrator of the DC will quote certain parameters, what will be the timeline, what competencies are going to be assessed, what tools are going to be used. The tool also makes a difference, and all that. Then there will be some negotiation process, and definitely it will run into a few days. It will not be just an hour or 2 hours work. It will be running into a certain number of days, and the cost will be not a small amount. It will be a reasonable amount of cost, because you have to engage the experts. Now, all these factors will determine how many days it will take. And also an undertaking from the company that they will not disturb the candidate during that period. So the assessment center, the development center will tell this is the time required for me to give you a report on this job role. Now, it may be a marginal tweaking probably should be possible, but then they cannot compromise on the integrity of the process.
So, in and all, we can't say that there is a minimum or a maximum duration for any of the development center.
That depends on the roles and the assessment requirements. You cannot really say that this is the minimum or this is the maximum. It all depends on uh, what job role you want them to assess.
Why I was asking, sir, because I think right now what we generally hear from the stakeholders from our departments and in our organization, so I think the kind of appetite which the organization has nowadays, and then they actually put a so-called tag of an agility and the pace that no, they want everything to be turned around, not only in months or years, but in the form of a days or hours. So that's what I think I wanted to understand, like how we can actually implement this particular thing, a development center, because I think it requires a lot of budget, a lot of time investments, and then it will actually going to, I think, impact the BAU productivity as well, because your employees will be going under different sort of an assessments. Not sure like if they can be on a work while performing their BAU things, the assessments can be done, or maybe a development center can be put it across, or do we really require a person to be pulled out from the BAU activities and then keeping him into the development center for a certain amount of period?
Okay, let me put it this way. I think we are the what you are really talking about is what we refer to as high performance work systems. Now, yeah, the strategic human resource management for almost 30 years has been promoting the high performance work systems, where you put employees under pressure and you get a lot of productivity. I mean, that has unfortunately been the case since the early 90s to probably till now. And what happened in this period is, for everything you want everything else to be done at a quick pace, because you want all the employees to be on their job role and give the best of the productivity. so that the organizations can benefit from them. That is the philosophy in which we have been working, and we are still continuing to work. But the casualty in this is the employee himself. Ultimately, if you want everything to be cut short and the employee has to give the best to the organization, the employee is the victim of the circumstances. That is what is happening. And therefore, today we are all the organizations, including the traditional organizations, are confronted with the situation of employee well-being. Why employee well-being has become so important today is not because of COVID. In fact, even before COVID also, employee well-being was a concern, but COVID actually brought it forward, and we are more concerned about the employee well-being today, because under pressure, people will work, but then that has its own consequences. The dark side of high performance work systems in organizations, including the IT industry, is that employee well-being is a big casualty. In fact, no wonder that people in software industry, some of them, because they cannot bear with the pressure in the organization, they commit suicide. Right, that has become quite common in many places, and that has given rise to the need to have the employee well-being. Now, if organizations are continuing to pursue that and they want to do this DC at a very short time, then the whole purpose is not being met. So one must understand at the HR director level or the VP HR level, that why are we referring people at a price to a development center? What is the purpose of it? And if you want a fair report about that employee, I think you must allow them to give enough time to the development center, so that the end goal is development of the individual, and that is to be met. If you don't do that, and if you hurry it up as a business requirement, the development center may comply with certain demands from the client, but ultimately whether that will serve the purpose is a question that we have to address.
Got it.
Yeah. No, it is like this. As a teacher, if I cover all the syllabus in the last 1 week and ask the students to go for test, now am I making them to learn? And if I'm only looking at the examination and getting some marks, that may serve the purpose. But is it serving the purpose of learning? Definitely not. That is how it is.
True.
Yeah. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, yeah.
Your question. Wonderful. Lovely. All right. I think the crux of this whole thing is the development activities. One, what feedback are you giving to the participant? Giving feedback is not an easy task. Feedback giving itself is, I mean, there are now courses on how actually you can give feedback to your employees. It has developed into that level where feedback giving is no longer an art. You can also practice. It's some part of it is science and some part of it is art, and you can train your employees on how to provide feedback. So SSRs should be extremely good at giving the feedback, and that feedback will include one, the participants areas of strength, because always whenever you're giving feedback, you must always start with the positive aspects of an employee or the participant in a development center, because that makes the negative part or the development part more acceptable. If you straight away bombard the participants with the development needs or the negative parts of his feedback, the participant will close his mind. He will not accept the inputs that you're providing. Therefore, start with the areas of strength, provide enough of appreciation to the strengths of the participant, and then move on to the areas for development. Don't call it as weaknesses, call it as areas for development. And that you refer, always tie it down to the job role that he is aspiring for, or the organization is planning to provide him. So that you are, as adults, we'll always accept what immediately matters to us. If I am asked to improve on certain dimensions of my performance, which will help me to eventually achieve a career position, then I'll be more receptive to that feedback, because it is going to help me to realize my career aspiration. So the feedback, which is the crux of it, has two components, and then the final recommendation that the candidate should provide or prepare an individual development plan based on the feedback and the report contents, and then present it to his organization, which is then a sort of a discussion point for his supervisor in the organization and the HR department, so that to what extent the individual should improve himself and to what extent the organization will take responsibility in sending him or her for a L&D center program and outside training program will then be decided with some timelines. So this is the essence of it. So what goes into the feedback? Talk about the strengths, or the positive points about the participant. Then that again, as we said, the development center, you keep on coming back to it. For each competence, you must assess the person using 2 or 3 different techniques, then by 2 or 3 different assessors. So what is the observation at each point under which simulation or which activity or which assessment tool you have used? If you are able to refer it back to the participant, he or she will be able to appreciate it better. Then after all that, you come to some kind of a prescription. It is not that if you do this, this will happen, but then it is suggestive that what are the development activities that you should undertake. By that, the development center does not guarantee if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you will eventually achieve this. Development center is only a process where you diagnose some gaps and make some suggestions, but then you don't guarantee anything. That requires the personal work of the individual concerned and in his own interest, rather than blaming anybody. So nobody can say, or you should not give any scope to anybody to say that, oh, the development center has suggested this and I have not been able to achieve it even after doing it. It is only suggestive in the best interest, an unbiased report. But finally, whether things will happen or in the way that you have suggested depends on many other factors which are not within the control of the development center. So, for making observations in the development center, one of the tools that you use is behaviorally anchored rating scales, which you would have studied earlier. But I'm going to emphasize a little more on this now because this is important for you to understand what happens in the development center. It is a behavior based measure, and it evaluates you from the perspective of your job. Your behavior is not going to be assessed from any other perspective in your job role. So you are evaluated, the employees are evaluated on each performance dimension by comparing their job behaviors to specific behavior examples that anchor each level of performance. The task of the rater is to find the point on the scale that is most typical of the employee's performance in that dimension. There are some examples, and this I've taken it from the website from Purdue University. It is for a university role. Just see, it's very interesting. Why we don't do that in our country? I don't know. I have not seen anybody, any other Indian institution doing it. So they are doing at 2 levels. One is at the performance level, the role based, the functional based scale. The other one is university level competencies. Now, very interestingly, they have taken 4 in each. For the university level competencies, 4, and the technical competencies, let us say, another 4 or so. And at the university, they looked at the overall job performance of the individual. You take a uh, professor, associate, assistant, whatever. Now, execution of duties and responsibilities aligned to the job description, job family. Now, how well are you doing it? We'll see the rating that later on. Then professional development, attainment and application of essential knowledge required to achieve job responsibilities. Now, professional development happens all the time. There is no end to it. Till one retires from the job, you have to continue to do it. Then culture and values, employees' attainment of university relationship and cultural expectations. I think very important, which in many of the Indian institutions, I really don't find the value statement, but these people have focused on how well are you aligned to the university's value system. and supervision, successful execution of workplace processes, and employee engagement responsibilities. Now, on these things, they have put 5-level scale: outstanding, exceeding expectations, meets expectations, needs improvement, does not meet expectations. So that is how they have rated their employees, which is pretty good. Actually, if you do it well, although there may be some biases, but still you've got a reference point. So behaviorally anchored rating skills are pretty useful. So from the DC perspective, you can look at talent acquisition. The DC can be used for talent acquisition, learning and development, performance management, career pathing, succession management, and culture. Now, in all these instances, one can make use of the bars, and you can design appropriate rubrics so that the participants can be rated very, very objectively based on your observations, and a report can be given. From the talent acquisition perspective, recruiters can be given what behaviors are needed, and then hiring managers they can be asked to use the bars so that they can evaluate the candidates more scientifically. And if there are multiple raters for the in the interview process, they all follow the same scales. Then you can compare the ratings given by different people, and your assessment of the candidate is much more scientific than just giving an opinion based response on the selection of a candidate. Now, the Learning and Development Center, coaching and development are easier for MAS when they have specific behaviors for to target. And most enterprise class learning management systems use bars to help create individualized learning paths. Now, if you're able to bring that, I think some of your organizations may already have these LMS systems in place, and then you will be able to customize the inputs for each of the candidates so that the performance of the candidate can be optimized in his or her job role. Then in PMRS, performance management and reward systems, you can always use the bar system for effective evaluation of the employee and compensate him or her correspondingly. In succession management, career pathing, in all these areas, you can use the bars scaling. Now, as I've shown you earlier in the case of the university, a bar scaling normally has either 5 or 7 or 9 levels of rating. It depends on how you are able to frame, or to what extent you can frame the statements, and how granular you want to make. But typically 5 are what people take. Otherwise, it can be 7 or 9 also. Then you have to frame the statements based on that. Now, you can always start with one as definite weakness in the lowest in the scale, and outstanding is the highest in the scale. And in between, you can word them appropriately and unambiguously so that everybody or anybody who uses this will get the same meaning, so that there is no problem in implementation of the scale. Now here you can see, for example, you are assessing the one competence of a nursing professional. For a nurse to deal with the difficult patients is a very important competence. All patients will not be the same, and some patients will be more difficult than the others. Now, if you have to write a statement on this particular competence, you can look at the number 1 will be the lowest, and number 5 will be the highest rating. So at number 1, you can give the description as often impatient with difficult patients, regularly needs other nurses' help to deal with these patients. So that is the lowest. You are really not competent. That competency is somewhat missing in you. Then number 2 is occasionally impatient with the difficult patients, rarely needs other nurses' help to deal with these patients. Number 3 is never impatient with the difficult patients, shows sympathy in their interactions with patients. And if you look at the extreme, the highest, the outstanding rating, never impatient with the difficult patients, shows sympathy in their interaction with patients and their families, helps other nurses with the difficult patients, eases patient fears. So the scale gradually goes up to the outstanding from the definite weakness. And if these kinds of skills are well developed, well curated, and well articulated, and you are able to rate the uh, participants based on their job role and what kind of behaviors are expected from them, then the final report will be very, very valuable, insightful, and both the organization as well as the individuals can get benefited by that particular scale. Right. I think with that, we have completed the DC organization. If you have any questions, we can address either from this chapter or any other chapter. We still have some time. We can discuss that. Yes, Mr. Ramesh.
Sir, I want to know, is there the difference between the training manual and DC manual?
Training manual is prepared by the L&D department, right? And that talks about how the training processes go on, whereas the DC manual is given by the DC administrator, prepared by the team that is managing the DC. The here how the candidate, the participant of the DC will be going through various processes. What are the timelines required? What competencies are being observed? And what behave, what the authentic behavior that is expected from the participant, those are outlined. Whereas the training manual tells us what is the training program that you are undergoing, what is the duration of the training program, what is the content of the training program, what are the outcomes expected out of the training program, and what is the, if there are any assessments in the training, those things you will write there. So DC is prepared, it is a different document altogether compared to a training document.
Sir, can we treat it the complementary? Sir, training manual is the complementary to the development.
No, it is like this. Suppose I write the maths examination, and in the maths examinations, let us say there are some 3, 4 different components: algebra, trigonometry, and geometry. And after the assessment, the teacher comes to a conclusion that I'm not doing well in geometry, right? And then I am referred for a training program, special classes in geometry. When I go to the geometry, tutorial classes there, they give me inputs on geometry, right? It is not I would not say complementary. I don't know whether you call it complementary. It is an outcome of DC leads to a training design, a training requirement, and
Okay.
the training process is independent of this,
Okay, sir.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Any other question that you have?
No, sir, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Anybody else? Any other issue that you want to discuss? How is your assignment thing going on? Have you all started your assignments?
Yet to start, Kapila.
Okay. 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 Fine. So if you have any questions today,
Sir,
yeah.
I have a question.
question. We are waiting for the question, sir, for the assignment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Jara, you wanted to say something.
Yes, sir. So, I've not been there. Like I mentioned, it's not my elective, and I probably wouldn't have attended all of your classes. But I would like to understand the significance of DC on a whole, because when it comes to organization and uh, 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 trainings and everything, they usually try to cut costs. And when it comes to DC, like you mentioned, the amount that they usually charge is probably not very small. So, in that ways, how significant can DC be, and who, in what circumstances will a organization opt for a DC service?
Okay. Wonderful. Very interesting question.
Thank you.
You know, there's a saying, if you think training is costly, try to run your organization without training. Now, the obviously the organizations, generally the CEOs, for whatever the reason, they try to cut the training costs and the training budgets quite often, and particularly when the profits are under pressure. But the empirical studies suggest that if you use assessment center, also the development center, and then subject your employees for development processes or career pathing, or recruit the employees through assessment center, the ultimate gain to the organization is to the extent of 40% savings, right? What it basically means is you're putting your employees through a process where their fitment to the organization is much better than not having the development center. When the fitment is better, obviously you are having higher levels of productivity. And the employees also think that if you are investing in their development process, the employees' commitment to the organization goes up, because you are demonstrating as an organization that I want you to develop. That increases the emotional connect of the employee with the organization, and the investment made by the organization will be valued by the employee, and eventually his or her engagement and commitment levels will be shown, will be demonstrated through his performance, by which your return on the investment on development center will be far lower than the eventual gain to the organization by the productivity and the right, because of the right fit and the motivation of the employee. In HR, one of the biggest problems is not everything can be quantified. It's not easy to quantify. In marketing, you can quantify the number of units sold, or number of items sold, number of hours of engagement, or and things like that, and convert everything into monetary terms and say this is the benefit that I am giving to the organization. In HR, quite often these are all intangibles. So if you don't send a person to the DC and do not train them well, the consequential cost to the company may not be easily quantified. Therefore, it is difficult to assess what is the benefit by sending them somebody to DC. But yet, there are some people who have made some scientific studies, and they found that the benefit to the organization to the extent of about 40%. One is your retention levels in the employees go up. Once your retention levels go up, you are reducing the cost of recruitment. That is a saving. Your productivity levels improve. Therefore, your organized competitive advantage goes up, because your cost of production will come down. Number three, your organization gains a reputation as a good employer. The employer branding will improve. Therefore, you will be able to attract better talented employees to your organization. So these are all, so many advantages are there by sending an employee to DC and eventually getting the benefit to the organization. I hope I have answered your question. If you still have any doubt, please ask me. Yes, ma'am.
Uh, I so thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's a good question. I think often we think that, you know, it's like your child. An employee is an organization, we consider it as a family, and an employee as your child at the CEO level, at the leadership level. If you don't send your child for development purposes at the beginning of his childhood, and you want to save on the cost of his development, then eventually it will show up as he or she grows up, and he or she will not meet your own expectations. So investment on employees, that is what we call it as investment in human capital, is always beneficial, although you may not always be able to calculate and say that this percentage is what is the gain, but still you will gain. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other question? Mr. Naren?
No, sir. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. And Ms. Preeti? Preetika.
No, sir, no.
No, okay. You spoke. I know.
No, sir, nothing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Pritika?
No, sir, nothing. Thank you.
Nothing. Okay. Mr. Prince Kapoor.
Thanks, sir. Actually, I've already got a lot of insights while the people have asked questions. So it's a great thing. Thank you, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful, awesome. Anything from Mr. Sandeep?
No, sir. Thank you.
Well, I think Mr. Jugal Kishore, sometime back you asked me whether there are some examples of some development centers and assessment centers.
Correct. So last week I actually requested you that if you can
Yeah.
provide some
Uh,
details.
where are you located? Bombay, is it?
No, no, no. I am at Indore, sir.
Indore. Okay, 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 okay. Okay. I think one of the well-performing centers in this space in India, it seems, though I have not had any interaction, is there is a company called Imochai in Pune.
Okay.
Right. So you can go through their website and you will find some nice, interesting stories about which are the companies using their services, what are they doing, and how it is benefiting the organizations and all that. They seem to be supporting some 500 organizations, which include some of the well-known names in the industry. So there are some other companies. To my surprise today, in the process to answer your question, I also realized there is an international company called QS iGauge. Some of you may be aware of it. QS iGauge also seem to be doing the assessment and development work, but on a lower scale. So it is catching up. I think some of these international rating agencies are also seem to be getting into this space, at least in India, because it's still a developing area in this country, and a lot of opportunities are there for those who want to have some entrepreneurial aspirations.
Uh, can you come up with the name of the organization once again, sir?
Uh,
In India?
I Mocha.
I.
Mocha. Please go through their website, and I think it may be quite interesting for many of you to know what they are doing, and look at how best one can get into those kinds of activities.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you have any further thoughts on that, next week we can bring it up and we can discuss. But opportunities are there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So maybe if you have nothing else to ask, maybe we'll close a little premature today, and then we'll catch up in the coming week. Right? Next week we can catch up.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
All right. So thank you all, and wish you a happy rest of the day, Sunday, and happy week ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.